Again, the only heresy that matters are those heresies against the current order of things, against the current orthodoxy, the new ecclesiology, the synodal church. And the only people ever accused of heresy and schism are those rigid traditionalists.
Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò argues that he is not in schism. We've invited Dr. Anthony Stine on the team to give us the summary cliff notes from a very long rebuttal from Archbishop Maria Viganò to the charges at the Vatican that he is spreading schism.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
We've invited Dr. Anthony Stine on the team from Return to Tradition. One of the things that I've been saying is about the Viganò story is it's just calling him a sedevacantist, in my opinion, is missing a lot. It's too simple. His argument is way more nuanced and I would argue has greater implications than just simply being a sedevacantist. What do you say?
Well, I agree completely. A sedevacantist is typically not going to appeal to the bishops and the cardinals of the Roman Curia to adjudicate an issue as important as this, because sedevacantists, rather famously, don't believe any of the sacraments of the post-conciliar church are valid, or they are dubious at best. That is what the sedevacantists believe. Archbishop Viganò has never said anything to imply that he holds that position. Never at one time said anything. I know because I've read virtually every letter he's written in the last 6 years.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but he's basically saying that it's not just that Pope Francis was, not canonically elected properly, but that he's an anti-pope. Again, I think that has much greater implications than just pure sedevacantism. He is saying he is a false and a fake pope. That's a bigger deal. How do you think it's going to impact those Catholics who find themselves in that sort of gray zone here about the current crisis in the church?
I have seen over the past few years increasing numbers of Catholics at least entertain the idea, but others get repelled completely by it. And I've seen in the aftermath of Viganò's recent letters where he's out and out saying this, some people say that they were done with him, but others say that they were finally glad somebody was saying it. I think you're going to see the polarization in traditionalist and conservative Catholic circles grow because of this, actually, which is unfortunate, but I think that's what you're going to see as the most likely consequence of this. My assertion is that back in May, Archbishop Viganò accused Pope Francis of committing crimes like Ted McCarrick. He said he had seminarians who attested to this. The response initially from a lot of people was that he needs to bring proof. I'm one of those who believes he needs to bring proof. I think he will eventually. The process against him was started in early May. He made this assertion in mid to late May. But famously, the wheels of justice and everything else in the Vatican move rather slowly. But this accelerated. This was the fastest movement I've ever seen. To give you an idea, Father Marco Rupnik, guilty of things that I can't bring myself to say out loud, aside from coercing nuns to commit vile, unspeakable acts with him of a sexual nature and then absolving them of their sins in the confessional, thus incurring automatic excommunication. The process against him is moving at a snail's pace, or rather at a normal Vatican pace. But they accelerated with Viganò. Combined with the rumored crushing of the diocesan Latin Mass that's supposedly happening in the next 2 weeks, and other things going on, including, I don't know if you've heard this story, but there had been talks with the Anglicans behind the scenes, and conservative Anglicans are considering coming into communion with Rome because the Vatican will not require them to be on the same page dogmatically about things like holy orders and the Eucharist, sacrificing truth for unity.
Wow.
That's
terrible.
It's absolutely terrible because, again, the only heresy that matters are those heresies against the current order of things, against the current orthodoxy, the new ecclesiology, the synodal church. And the only people ever accused of heresy and schism are those rigid traditionalists. And Viganò is a great stand-in for that because, for whatever reason, they think he's the leader of traditional Catholicism. There is no leader of traditional Catholicism. We would be better off if we had one. somebody that virtually every traditionally minded Catholic could rally around, but there is not a figure like that. Cardinal Burke is divisive. Cardinal Sarah is divisive. Bishop Schneider is divisive. All of them are, but none of them are nearly as divisive as Viganò. He's a good straw man for them to put in as a stand-in.
100% of the cardinals, and let's just say the vast majority of bishops around the world, and as far as I know, 100% of all governments, all recognize Francis as the successor of St. Peter in the chair. So that, I think, makes the argument, I mean, in my opinion, anyway, it's part of the reason why I'm not a sedevacantist. And yet here we are. We find ourselves in this. Now, let me ask you this question. So the argument that Carlo Maria Viganò is making about Pope Francis being an anti-pope, we have seen that in history before.
Yes, I mean, he's not the first anti-pope. At one point, it was about an average of one anti-pope for every 8 papacies. That's what it was at one point. The average is one commentary I saw on this. It's just that we haven't had one in a long time. The last anti-pope, I think, was in the Great Western Schism, if I'm not mistaken. But Viganò's not asserting that he's an anti-pope in the traditional sense of an anti-pope, where there you have 2 figures competing for the rightful claim to the papacy. He is essentially claiming that the revolution in the church started with the Masonic takeover of the Vatican II. That's what he's saying. That the church, what came after was the church being the champion of the French Revolution's values. It's not a new accusation. Traditionalists have been making I would say usually a more moderated in terms of language employed, but the same kind of accusation for 60 years. It's that Viganò is, if you can 100% say he's guilty of anything, it's either his inability to or unwillingness to use diplomatic language to describe the situation in the church, which is ironic for a formal papal nuncio.
Do you see this getting worse in the church? I find that this is just one more step towards an internal civil war.
Yes, especially if this Latin Mass ban is true, if it does come down as rumored, and if that's not deemed enough. Because people forget that groups like the FSSP and others like them, the FSSP have gone out of their way to say that they are not a traditionalist group, that they are dedicated to the traditional sacraments, but they are, ecclesiologically, they believe to be on board with everything going on. But those groups exist at the whim of the Vatican. They simply do. And they operate in every diocese on the whim of the local ordinary. We have seen, especially in France, the FSSP, Institute of Christ the King, be kicked out of dioceses on the whim of the local ordinary. The Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest had to famously, this past weekend, give up a ancient parish of some kind in France, turned it back over to the ordinary, and was kicked out. This could be the way this plays out as part of the bigger picture of things going on will determine what happens next on the traditional Catholicism and conservative Catholicism side of things versus everything else going on. And I hate using terminology like that, but there is a divide in the church. The church is polarized right now. And there are people who would like to pretend that's not the case. But unfortunately, you should be at least aware of things coming on. Otherwise, you might be caught, you might be blindsided when things come down.
Do you think, Viganò seems to think that the conclusion of this trial is a foregone conclusion, and that is that he'll be labeled and excommunicated for, pushing schism onto the faithful. Do you see that outcome as being sort of obvious?
Yes, that seems obvious.
Yeah,
I would be surprised if in the next few days you didn't get a ruling from the Vatican on this.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.